Thank you so much for joining me, Jonty. So for everyone watching, you are pretty much a startup wizard. You've been at various startup scaling design teams, most recently Airlo, Where Is My Transport, just to name a couple. So yeah, why don't you start by telling me a little bit more in terms of your entry into the design world?
How far back do you want to go?
As far back as you want.
I think we'll skip 99 to 2010. In that time, I suppose I kind of did a bit of everything. Got really interested in usability and accessibility quite early on. At early turn of the century, we were building websites and products for ourselves. That was a big thing, and then if people liked it, then great. But it wasn't until kind of 2005 or 6 that the industry broadly started to shift and people started to think about users and customers a bit more. So a bit more substance over style. I worked in games for 3 years. I did a chunk of time in financial services and some healthcare stuff. And then I joined a company called Albion as UX design director. That was 2000 and I can't remember.
Just way back.
That was really interesting because I was hired and I turned up for my first directors meeting in January, and there were 3 people who knew who I was, and only 2 of them knew what I was there to do. And there was a room of 12 directors who had no idea who I was or what I was doing. But we scaled a product team, research design function from 2 to about 28 in under 2 years, and added a massive amount of value to the business. That was really interesting, I think, because some of the product work we were doing was for organizations that nowadays you would look at and go, well, they've got their own product team. So Telefonica Digital, for instance, you would look at them and go, well, why is that not being done in-house? And that was really substantial pieces of work, and it was great to be able to work in a sort of early days minimum viable product approach. And that was very, very satisfying. Building happy, familial, I don't mean family, I mean familial teams. So that's teams that can have arguments, teams that can debate, teams that can patch up relationships, teams that work well with other teams and there's sort of mutual respect and broad empathy. I left Albion. Shall I carry on?
Yes, please do.
I left Albion with an old friend and CTO, a chap called Andy Beaumont, and we started a digital studio called Hacktar. We worked pretty much exclusively with beyond profits, charities, education, publishing, and I did that for 5 years. I kind of came to the end of my road with Hacktar probably around year 4, when I realized that I wasn't doing what I wanted to do and I was running a company badly.
Learning all the lessons.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that I really enjoy about giving business advice nowadays, like business design and that kind of thing, is I've made so many mistakes, and it gives you a really interesting perspective when you hear someone talk about their organization or talk about their team, and that's what experience grants you. If you've never made any mistakes, then you really won't get to see what's coming when there is a mistake.
And what made you want to make that shift from owning your own studio back into going into organisations?
I felt the value I was adding to Hactar was sort of diminishing. And, we were talking earlier about at what point do you bring people in who are better at stuff than you?
Yeah.
And we were really lucky that we were working with someone for a chunk of time who was much more organised. They were really good at that part of it and enjoyed it. I'd sort of got to the point where I wasn't really doing the kind of consulting I wanted to do. I wasn't doing any real design work. We'd hired some great people, so that part of the work was dealt with. And what I have found through my career is that I now purposefully, mentally build in my own redundancy. So I look at 2 to 3 years with an organisation. If I'm not able to advance my career in that organisation for an alternative role, then that's the moment at which I exit. And that should be fairly straightforward, because if you've done your job as a leader and you've hired properly, there should be very little disruption, because the people you've hired should be talented and smart enough to take over your work. Year 5, so 2019, probably March, I had a phone call from an ex-boss of mine who was doing some advisory work for Where's My Transport. He basically said, I'm working with these guys, I don't know whether you're going to be interested. It's in South Africa. We need someone to come in for 3 months and help us work out what a B2B engineering and data-led organisation looks like when you go, we're going to be human-led and design-focused, and what does B2C look like for an organisation like us. That was meant to be 3 months. It became 6 months. It became 3 years. And we went from being very present. There was an office in Cape Town, and then we spun up offices in various different countries. And then COVID happened. And so the playbook, I suppose, for research and testing and deploying products in different countries kind of had to be rolled out. So I think when you talk about playbooks, you often think of, A, B, C, D, E, and that's how it works. Like, you follow that. But what we were doing was almost like sort of flashcards. So here are a bunch of tools you can use. What works best in your country, in your culture, with the kinds of people that this product can be exposed to. It's sort of choose your own adventure for product research, development, deployment. And yeah, so I did 3 years there. Got another phone call.
Always the way.
People tend to, it's weird, people do tend to use the telephone when it comes to me. And another organisation at LO were looking for a VP of product and design to come in and take a business that had scaled fantastically. They were sort of leading the charge in the sort of eSIM marketplace sector, and they needed someone to come in and work out what that looked like, how to establish North Star, how to bring rigor to research, data, qual and quant, and then how do you build a product design and research function. And
obviously you've been in leadership for quite some time now, but way back when you were hands-on IC, how did you find that transition going from being an IC into leadership? Because it can be quite a tricky one.
I was very fortunate because I had quite a gradual transition. I think the mistake some people make is driving their career for themselves, and it becomes noticeable. In the leadership position, I've noticed it, and you can spot the people that are kind of doing it to advance their career and doing it for their ego. The people that do the work they're the ones that stand out. They're doing the work because they love the work, they believe in the work, they're good at the work. Those are the ones that tend to be identified for leadership positions because the people around them see them doing the work, doing the work well, and delivering at a certain standard consistently. When people are doing it for ego, they will often put more energy into the shiny stuff. And that's for visibility. I was very lucky because I loved what I was doing, and I was given the opportunity to just do bits and pieces. Like, right, well, find some people to do this, or collaborate with this team, or write this brief, or lead this piece of work with a client, or become the central point of communication within a team. So it's bits by bits by bits. And when people turn around and go, hey, do you want to come and do this with us? Then you sort of feel ready-ish. I firmly believe that any new role should terrify you a bit if you want to be moving forward with your career. It's very easy to kind of tread water, but I sort of relish the zero to knowledge. I think that's probably why I've worked in so many different sectors, because I love that bit.
Love the unknown.
Yeah, I like messy. I like not knowing stuff. I love asking questions. And I like coming into organisations where people they either know the answers or they're honest enough to go, don't know the answers, we should probably find out. So yes, the transition from IC to leadership was quite nice. I didn't feel at any point like the training wheels and stabilizers had been whipped away. It was, I kind of knew how to ride the bike a bit.
Well, I guess, like you say, when you're in a role, you naturally start to pick things up, or you might start picking up responsibilities before the actual promotion comes into place. So you feel like you've kind of been doing it a bit, and then you feel like it's more natural. Do you feel like there can be a pressure, though, for people to move into leadership, that it might not necessarily be for them, because it's almost like leadership is the one path you will take, and that is the only path for some people?
I'm always really surprised when that happens. Because I think it speaks to the kind of dialogue that a leader has with their team. Obviously, there are occasions where someone thinks they want to do a thing, but actually, they get into it like, do you know what, this isn't for me. But the majority of the time, I would imagine that you would know the people on your team well enough and have had enough conversations with them to go, do you know what, you're an amazing IC. I mean, I know some incredible ICs who've been doing it for years and years and years, and they are very happy doing that. They're not interested in managing people. It's just not part of their DNA. They just like getting on, and that's absolutely fine. I think leadership is obviously more than just managing people and managing relationships. But I think that's always surprised me when that happens in organisations, when people suddenly go, oh yeah, we've got this person, they don't actually want to be doing that job. It's like, well, why have you promoted them?
No, it's true. Have you ever been proven wrong by someone that you thought maybe wasn't meant to be in leadership and then has turned out to be a fantastic leader?
No, I think anyone that I've promoted to a leadership position has already been in that transition stage in their old role. And I'm a huge proponent of very clear career paths. That is one of the ways that you increase retention. You are very clear on, this is what we're doing this year, this is what we should be doing next year. If you want to go from here to here, this is how we can facilitate that. I also feel that as a leader or as an employer, you actually have a duty of care, which I think is really, really important. That person is only with you for a portion of their career. I think the recent stats are probably about 3 years. I like to use that as kind of a rough mark. I would imagine that in certain roles it's less than that. If you can get 3 years out of someone, that's amazing. But what you need to be able to do is prepare them for not just advancing within your organization, but what they do next.
Yeah.
Because, we know each other. LinkedIn is LinkedIn, but there are communities, there are Slack groups, there are get-togethers where people will talk about where they've been. Oh, you should definitely work with so-and-so. Or I know so-and-so is hiring. I wouldn't work with them. I was only there a year and a half and I wanted to go up to 6 months, that kind of thing. So you're providing more than the job.
Yeah. And
I think that's crucial, especially in this day and age where it's so expensive to acquire talent.
Yeah.
I think in the UK, it's about 20% of salary. That's not including recruiter costs. That is CV writing, that's screening, that's bringing people in for interviews. It's, the hours and hours and hours that you spend looking at cover letters.
Yeah. No, it's true. It's a huge investment. So it's like you need to look after the investment that you've decided to bring in.
Yeah. And you need to make that first hire the right one.
Yeah. It's key.
Yeah.
And then in terms of progression paths, what key things do you put in for like the IC route? Because I think it's quite interesting. I've been speaking with a lot of leaders and it's really hard to answer the question of what progression can you offer to an IC that will make them feel valued, feel like they're growing, and most importantly as well, help retention in the team.
Mentoring is I bake that into every role. It doesn't matter where you are in the business, at what level of seniority, pretty sure someone will be able to learn something from you. That can either be in your own discipline or that can be pairing with someone from another discipline. So making sure that is baked in from day one is really helpful, because when you are able to share your talent with others, that I think sort of paves the way for advancing to more senior roles. It's about communication, it's about clear communication, it's about showing that you are willing to not just put yourself out there, but also listen to what other people have to say. And so much of what we do is about listening, and when we see companies falter and teams disintegrate, it's often because people aren't being listened to. They don't feel like they're being listened to.
Yeah.
And that's that can make or break an organisation.
So you built and scaled design teams for quite a few startups that have been gearing towards funding rounds. So talk us through that process of what that looks like, how it impacts the team, what the growth is as well. Tough
Walking,
one.
It really, I'm going to say it depends. It depends on the organisation. It depends how much the organisation knows about themselves. It depends on whether they're assuming too much. This is what we need. Is it actually what you need? I've loved going into businesses where you potentially have people from different disciplines who have been there for a while and know the product, know the customers, have battled against internal processes. You often get people who have been doing research. They're just not called researchers. It might not be terribly well catalogued, but they have more insight into the company from a qualitative but also sometimes quant perspective than anyone else. I always go in and try and find the smartest people, speak to them, speak to everyone else, and get a measure of what the business needs. Is there any talent within the organisation that you can leverage in the interim? And then what's that first hire? Can you get past with what's in the organisation already? Do you need to look at contractors? I think the mistake lots of people make is rushing into, right, we've got to get a product manager. D. We've got to get a researcher, we've got to get a writer, we've got to get a designer. Money is always limited.
Yeah.
And if you're going for funding rounds, people want to see you spending your money effectively and in a smart way. So it really does depend on the organisation. Some organisations have money to, not necessarily to burn, but they have money they need. They've got money that needs to be spent, and investors, board, etc., expect it to be spent. And
they want to see what's being done with it.
Yeah, and there's been an agreement. Right, we're going to bring someone like this in, and they're going to build a team.
Yeah.
What shape that takes, whatever. Yeah. But yeah, it needs to be able to fulfill a certain purpose.
Why do you think as well, you kind of touched on it earlier, you see companies, they achieve big funding rounds, they'll scale teams massively, and then you see it 6-12 months later, they're completely cutting that team back down and they overhired. What leads a company to do that in the first place and then kind of come round to, oh gosh, we've probably gone too far here, let's draw it all back to the bare bones?
So the last couple of years, the market, I feel, has been led by the nose by, let's just say, Silicon Valley. Not just Silicon Valley, but the megacorps. They're the ones that are shaping the way the market works. Yes, there was substantial overhiring during COVID, but a lot of organizations actually hired the right number of people, but market forces and the news help dictate the next move, and that is a real challenge when you see that happening. And there are lots of organizations now, as I was saying earlier, who are rehiring. Certainly in the States, there are quite a lot of organizations that are rehiring the people that they gave massive severance packages to, because the leaders that they put into interim senior leadership roles, they were busy anyway. Yeah. And sticking two of them together does not make an effective leader.
No, definitely not. And people aren't unicorns.
Yes, they're not unicorns.
And what has the transition been like for you, going from startup to scale up phase? How it's impacted your team as well?
My transition from startup to scale up, they tend to be, my experience has always been coming into an organisation and there is a nice chewy problem. So there is often a degree of kind of carte blanche. Come in, what do you think we should do? Or come in, here's an org chart, or this is the budget that we've signed off. How are you going to spend it, and what's the return going to be like for the organisation? You know, how much more robust are we going to be? How much more reactive can we be to market forces? I think that's the differential, and I don't necessarily think that it's about the number of bodies within a team. It's just how a team functions, and that can be in one time zone, in multiple time zones. It can be all over the world, and different disciplines depending on where you are in the world.
And have you found that team members react well to it? Have you had people struggle with that transition or the changes that can come into play?
I think I was talking to a much smarter person than myself the other day, and we got onto reorg fatigue. And what sometimes happens is when you bring in a director, a VP, new leader, often in the lead up to that, in the 12 months prior to that person joining, there's been a lot of deck chair movement, and people are tired. They're sort of worn down by, I'm working in this team, or I'm working on this feature, or I'm in this work stream, or I'm reporting to this person. By the time you walk in the door, often they're kind of like, oh great, right, so
Here we go.
Yeah, what are you going to do? So you have to be really mindful of that, and sometimes you just have to sort of play with the structure until you have proven that any change you make is going to be meaningful.
And how do you personally communicate design success stories to like the wider organisation, helping them really understand the value behind what you're doing and getting that buy-in from senior stakeholders?
Do you mean once a job has been done, or while something is in flight, or when you're trying to make a case for a piece of work?
I think make a case and then the rest that follows after you've managed to make that case.
Okay, I think everything really boils down to storytelling and evidencing. If you want to make a material change within an organisation, then you need to be able to tell that story. Why is it going to be a good thing? What effect and value will it have on the business, on the business customers, on the team? That is the most effective way. Now, if you have a business in a single time zone, that's quite straightforward. You can do it at a town hall or in a particular meeting, the design meeting, where you talk about an outcome, a feature, a function, whatever, however you want to couch it. On a global scale, it's often really helpful to create deliverables. So that could be a presentation with a VO that can be sent out or put on Slack or put in Notion and is accessible so that people can watch it in their own time. Or, at a more sort of prosaic level, there's, you have a story that you put in an email. But I think the most important thing is that you are evidencing what you talk about. So where's the data? Because there are going to be people in the business that like fluffy stuff, and there are going to be people in an organisation that just want to see stats. Like, how are you going to shift the needle? And I think you need to be able to be well versed in telling stories to all sorts of different people.
And have you found that you've had more success getting design buy-in from earlier stage startups compared to ones that potentially have more processes are in place that are a bit more mature and further along in that journey?
That is interesting. More often than not, when an organisation brings design into the conversation, they have realised that is the moment.
Yeah, we need design now.
Either they have realised it, they've read the books, they've been to the conference, or the board have said,
it's time.
You've got now is the moment, or we should have done this last year. Look at the numbers. Why are people not using your product, or why are you not winning more contracts? What is the thing that is preventing you from achieving more?
Yeah.
And often the answer is not designing stuff, not researching stuff, not putting together a substantial product plan or a roadmap, or setting a North Star, or creating a product and design vision. That's often what's missing from an organisation. And coming in and being allowed to work with senior leadership to establish that, and often work with other teams to establish that in a sort of collaborative way, really energizes a business and helps an organisation move forward and move forward in a more effective way as well.
Nice. And how do you get the buy-in of people that might be a bit more reluctant about changes?
When you say changes,
bringing in different processes, bringing in things that is going to change the way that they potentially collaborate with people, do their job, or the results that they're going to be seeing.
Yeah. Talk to people.
Build relationships.
It is absolutely that. Talk to people, listen to people, understand how things have been done.
Yeah.
Before you go around making changes. What's working, what isn't working, where are people frustrated, and often you'll come into an organisation, there's just a historical way of doing things. Like we have always done it this way.
Yeah.
Why? Because
it's just the way.
It's just the way. Well, how about we add this, or how about we take this out? How about, would you like to spend less time doing this? Oh yeah, I'd love to spend less time doing this. Well,
this is what we
there is a way we can do that. Something like, an example might be, how are you building this thing? Well, we go and we take these individual objects out of this file and then we put them together. And it's like, well, would you like a design library? Oh, yeah, that could be cool. Right, well, how about you and this team work together on what that pattern library looks like?
Yeah.
And you are invested in it because it's being built with you. Exactly.
Yeah.
So there are all sorts of ways to grease the wheels and move things along.
And then looking back on your journey, is there anything that you would do differently? Any real hard lessons that you've learned that have really stuck out to you in your career, and things that you do take with you in your next roles?
I think there have been instances where I've been quite. I need to be careful how I say this. There have been instances where I've been fairly obstinate.
Okay.
I've always found the just do it side of things, certainly in startups. I've always found that a real challenge because the majority of my career has been, here is the evidence.
Yeah.
Let's do it. And now and again, you will just have to do something.
Yeah.
I feel that really good leadership means that you should almost be able to see that coming, and really good leadership of teams means that at the worst you're going to get a team that goes all right and then delivers.
Yeah.
And they will deliver brilliantly against any requirement, and that's a really tough one. That is a really tough one, especially when you are evidence-based.
Yeah. Because you naturally think, but why?
Yeah.
Why are we doing this?
So I think that's definitely something that I would go back and maybe, I would look differently at. I think there are many times where I've pushed back against just do it. Often for the right reasons, obviously.
Do you feel though, as well, when you get more experience, your knowledge becomes your power, doesn't it? Because we've had an interesting conversation in one of our workshops around how to transform an organisation from being opinion-led to insight-led, and people brought up quite an interesting point that when it comes to being insight-led, all of that data and all of that experience you've got, typically you'd like to think some of your opinions are going to be based on all of those experiences you've had, and at points you do have to trust your opinion that you are going to be doing the right thing.
Yes. I think experience counts for a lot, but as I said, my career has involved jumping from sector to sector, industry to industry. It's always been product design research, but it's really important not to make too many assumptions. Yeah. I love going from zero to knowledge, but to do zero to knowledge you have to shut up and listen.
Yes.
You can bring the best bits of your career. You can, you look at a room or look at a process, and you can see where perhaps the holes are. You can make suggestions, but it's just so important to be there to listen to begin with. I think that's absolutely crucial.
So you've had a lot of experience building international teams. What would you say is key to building like an inclusive culture, a team that actually works being on completely different time zones?
What is the key?
What is your secret sauce?
So there's a great book which I advise everyone to read if they're building or they work in an international team. It's called The Culture Map. Full of anecdotes, but also practical advice. I think you need to understand that you live in a tiny little bubble. And all the work, if you've never worked in an international team before, like across languages, cultures, time zones, you have spent your career in a bubble. I think when I went to work with Where's My Transport, I'd never really been to the Southern Hemisphere. And it's not until you go to the Southern Hemisphere that you realise that the Northern Hemisphere is tiny. It's just a sliver. And we have been programmed to see it that way because of the Mercator projection, which is like the view of the world, map view of the world, which overemphasises the Northern Hemisphere. And I think as soon as you put yourself in perspective, I think the UK is a really good example of this. We are tiny.
Yeah.
Absolutely tiny. And as soon as you start working with people in other countries, that's when your horizons broaden.
Yeah.
I guarantee we could throw a stone out of the window, have to go upstairs first, and we would hit someone with very, very sort of two-dimensional views of how other people in other countries work. And I think that level of kind of complacency and arrogance it's endemic. So the first thing to do is step back from that and realise that there are people all over the world who could do your job way better than you. You just happen to be in the position to be on the lookout to hire them. Being mindful of time zones, understanding calendars. For instance, what seasonality is there? If you go to Southeast Asia, there'll be a flooding season. If you go to Mexico, there's an earthquake season. I did not know this. You only find these things out when I had a colleague who was actually on a call with one of the team in Mexico City when an earthquake happened, which is, terrifying for everyone involved. And you don't know how little you know until you start doing it. So your original question, what's the secret sauce? Empathy and a willingness to understand, and to want to work with different people and work outside of your bubble.
Yeah, I think it's so important as well because it opens your eyes to different ways of thinking, different cultures, a completely diverse and inclusive team that you wouldn't be able to just achieve, like you say, hiring in one particular area.
Yeah, I would say one of the challenges to hiring internationally, especially in kind of startup world, you really need to be mindful of local employment law.
Yes. That is normally the thing that really
I think
is the obstacle.
Yeah, I think a lot of people get caught out. In the US, it's really easy to sort of let people go. In the UK, it's a little bit harder. And in lots of other countries, it's almost impossible. There are countries in Europe where it is a kind of job for life type scenario. You can't necessarily analyze an individual, you can analyze a team. So it makes it very difficult to go, well, this person is underperforming, has been for quite some time, but you can't.
But the rest of the team is doing great, so we can't do anything.
Yeah.
And what have been your biggest challenges recruiting a design team in your career? It changes like the wind.
Biggest challenges? It really does change like the wind, and it really depends where you are. So in certain countries where, you know, product design research is not quite as evolved, we're very lucky here in the UK where product design research communities have been around for a good long while, and they support each other and they upskill one another, and people are able to show their work and inspire others. And in other countries that's not necessarily the case. In other countries you will find really, really good researchers who also do, you know, flyers for bars, because that's the nature of the environment they work in. You know, they have to be adaptable, they have to have a portfolio of work, but they're also a really good researcher.
Yeah.
So that can be a challenge. More recently, I mean, I remember years and years ago, I was always getting CVs and portfolios with a big piece of work for Coca-Cola, because everyone worked for Coca-Cola at one point or another, and I would always push for, what did you do, who led, and you know, what were the outcomes? And I think we've gone past the phase of people just putting nice pictures of stuff that's been generated, and people are more mindful of where they sit in a team, what their individual contribution was, and, you know, what the impact of the work was. Not enough talent, too much talent. 10, 12 years ago, if you tried to hire a UX designer, they were probably already at Barclays. There was a huge hoovering up of, you know, consultancies and financial services, just taking all the best people, and some of the not best people, but there were not that many people on the market, and that was a real challenge.
And interesting topic for me anyway, UX writing, not something that's really often seen within startups. Why do you think that is, and do you think we're going to see a growth in that area?
Yeah, it's a really tough one. I think writing is one of those things that you don't know you need until you've got it, or you don't necessarily notice the difference as an organisation until you have someone within the business who can write. Whether that's long form, short form, call to action, descriptive, it makes such a huge difference, a vast difference. If you have a bot, for example, that is working and taking maybe 60-70% of your FAQs or your customer support, if that's really poorly written, then you are going to be spending a load more money and time on customer support tickets. I may or may not have noticed that in the past, and it's not a straightforward fix, because you can't go rewriting 490 lines of bot script without a tone of voice, without a set of patterns for writing. But I feel that I don't know whether we're going to see a turnaround in startup land, especially in the current climate. I'm hoping that I'm proved wrong. What might be interesting, and there might be a future for this, where as we've seen designers transition to being more product people, because that's where the work is, we may see trained and talented UX writers, creative writers transitioning and taking on more prompting work. they're smart, they can adapt their writing style, they can be creative, they can iterate because they're used to writing copy that needs to change based on data that comes in from users. So I think there might be a bit of a transition, and we may end up losing some of the UX writers that be available for the startup and scale-up world. When you go to places like Uber and others, there is a huge investment in UX writing, and it shows. If you've used any of those products in another country, you will see how hard they work on taking a style to another culture, to another city, and they make it global, local, hyper-local.
Yeah. I think it's really exciting to see as well when you can actually see the difference. Like you say, when you use Uber abroad, when you're on holiday, like the difference that you can experience. Like you say, you don't know you've got it, how good it is until you actually have it in an organisation. And then probably once you've got it in, you think, how have I survived this long without this?
Yeah. I mean, when I'm hiring, I do look for people that can write, people that can communicate, people that can present, and that's core. It's so important. I mean, it's not, I won't not hire you if you're not capable of writing beautifully, but it's such a bonus. It's such a, nice to have, because you don't want to be spending your time rewriting copy, because
it's powerful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much for joining me, Jonty.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me along.
Thank you. And thank you so much to everyone for watching. If you'd like to check out the full episode, you can view that on our YouTube channel.